On November 13, 2022, four students from the University of Idaho, living in an off-campus house rental, managed by the house's property management firm, formerly named Team Idaho Realty, in Moscow, Idaho, had their lives violently taken while two other roommates were present in the house, Dylan Mortensen and Bethany Funke. According to the probable cause affidavit offered by lead investigator, Corporal Brett Payne, both Mortensen and Funke witnessed the four decedents returning home at 2 a.m. and that the four decedents were in their rooms or asleep at 4 a.m., possibly with the exception of Xana, who was supposedly awake at 4 a.m., waiting for a food delivery. This statement offered by Brett Payne in his affidavit contrasts statements made by the two surviving roommates to law enforcement on the day of the murders, as is evidenced by the following.
I want to talk only about a couple of other things. The credibility of the witness that they talked to, the one that they cited information from, that was relied on. That appears in these affidavits, and it's relied on after Mr. Kohberger's identified to say, well, he has bushy eyebrows, so this person has to be right. It's relied on when the police officers put into the affidavit the footprint that I didn't talk about on my first one. We gave the court the photographs of it. I'm happy to give the court these. That's a misleading statement to the court or to the magistrate that was asked for probable cause. This footprint is at the very edge of the door. It's a single footprint and it's not repeated throughout the house. So to act like that bolsters this witness is really important, especially in context of the misstatements of the witness. I want to go through these. I won't read them in their entirety to the court, but Your Honor asked the prosecutor what they were. And I counted up, and at the very first interview, remember the issue was whether or not one of the victims ran downstairs. And she didn't say it once, she said it 4 times in a row in the very first interview. And that just didn't happen. It just couldn't have happened. And that was not told. In fact, that statement was brushed over and withheld from the magistrate. About the memory issues in the second interview the same day, there are 2 references to not remembering. A couple of days later, there's the third interview, and there's references to not remembering, being drunk, a statement, I don't know any of it. Like half this stuff, I don't know if it's a dream or if it's real. That's at page 399. At page 406, I don't know if this was real or in my mind was just like playing with me. But from what I think I heard, someone was crying in the bathroom. These are definite statements that were not given to the magistrate and in fact were brushed over. And credibility is really, really important when that person is relied on in the investigation.
The Commonwealth of Pennsylvania filed a complaint that was based on an affidavit of probable cause written by Brett Payne containing a combination of false statements, inaccurate information, misleading language, and omissions of fact material to the finding of probable cause.
We're going to begin by looking at the following 3 documents out of the state of Pennsylvania. The 3-page criminal complaint filed with a Monroe County Magistrate Court by 1 or more police officers, an accompanying affidavit drawn up by said officers, and a docket transcript filed with Monroe County, Pennsylvania.
First, note the times that the police report was faxed. Where was this document faxed to? We are gonna note both Pennsylvania and Idaho times. This notation of dates and times will be ongoing. Secondly, notice in the lower right corner, the checkbox for lab services. It is checked. We don't believe these lab services included any DNA stuff. The largest concern that we have here is the location of the magistrate court and the judge that presides over it. The district attorney, lending a hand in this case, is Mike Mancuso. The judge is his wife, Colleen Mancuso. Do you recall Mancuso bragging that he and his wife were undefeated at one point? Many of us do.
Question: did Pennsylvania law enforcement arrest, detain, and search Kohberger's person, property, and personal belongings prior to lawfully filing a criminal complaint?
To answer this question, we have to take a closer look at the criminal complaint, the accompanying affidavit, and the docket transcript. Looking at the police criminal complaint, we can see that the date on the faxed complaint is December 30th, and the time that the complaint was faxed was 6:36 a.m. We're going to need more information for two reasons. We know that law enforcement blasted Kohberger's house on December 30th in the early morning hours, most likely prior to 6:36 a.m. And according to Section 234 of the Pennsylvania Code, Rules of Criminal Procedure Rule 502, a criminal complaint is filed with a court prior to issuance of an arrest warrant. So we know that this search warrant came before any criminal complaint was filed as far as we can see. Pennsylvania Code, Criminal Procedure Rule 502 says the following. Criminal proceedings in court cases are instituted by the filing of a complaint, followed by the issuance of a summons or arrest warrant. Since this was arrest by warrant, we need to see a valid criminal complaint that obeys the order prescribed by Pennsylvania law.
Before we explore the rest of the December 30th police criminal complaint, shouldn't we first question the fact that the judge, Colleen Mancuso, is the wife of Monroe County District Attorney Mike Mancuso? Does this Idaho case get any more corrupt? Was there a conflict of interest, especially since the criminal complaint does not include Mancuso's signature? Again, this is a district attorney who publicly brags about the 7-0 record that he and his wife shares in the courtroom. If Brett Payne's perjurious affidavit was the basis of these Pennsylvania arrest and search warrants, the fact that the criminal complaint was the sleazy byproduct of nepotism, which doesn't even have a signature, causes one to think if they are vicariously chargeable in the violation of Kohberger's Fourth Amendment rights.
With the Monroe County Republican Party calling for a district court judge to resign, citing a conflict of interest.
That judge's husband, the newly elected district attorney for Monroe County. 69 News reporter Rick Holmes has the story.
A conflict of interest. Monroe County Magistrate District Judge Colleen Mancuso is married to newly elected District Attorney Michael Mancuso. Both are Democrats. The Monroe County Republican Committee is calling on Judge Mancuso to step down.
She's going to serve her own interest instead of the people's interest and continue to accept a full-time salary.
So we spoke with Judge Mancuso outside her court in Chestnut Hill Township. For your resignation, do you intend to resign?
Absolutely not.
Reason being?
I'm doing my job.
Back on December 28th, the Monroe County's magistrate president judge issued an order that Judge Mancuso could no longer process search warrants, arrest warrants, or provide over preliminary arraignments brought before her court, which covers 4 townships. A senior judge is now assigned to some of the work. Mancuso's husband, the former assistant DA in the county for 20 years.
He represents the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and it's not as if, in my opinion, he's representing a litigant, because he doesn't represent the victims, he represents the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania.
Whitehead says taxpayers aren't being served with 2 judges being paid to do the jobs of 1.
Other magistrates or potentially senior judges that will have to be brought in and potentially paid on top of what she's already being paid to do the job.
Judge Mancuso says she's still handling civil suits and things like tenant-landlord cases, also saying the Ethics Board instituted a waiver explaining to criminal defendants and their attorneys that there is a potential conflict, and if they want to proceed with the case, they have to sign a waiver. She says only 1 has refused.
I'm following the law. I'm not going to do anything that benefits or would hurt anybody in the case, just like before, and they've signed the waivers.
Judge Mancuso's husband, Monroe County District Attorney Michael Mancuso, did not return our requests for comment. With Judge Mancuso declining to step down, Whitehead says the only option would be impeachment in the state legislature. In Monroe County, Rick Holmes, 69 News.
Further down on the criminal complaint belonging to Pennsylvania troopers Nall and Larry, DNA was not approved according to the criminal complaint, which we see had been approved, or at least the paperwork reflects this much. We can also tell by the paperwork that fingerprints were not approved. Did Pennsylvania police not take Bryan's fingerprints? Something else that's strange is that at the bottom of page 2 of the criminal complaint, we see that none of the information about the vehicle has been entered into the criminal complaint approved by the Mancuso team. Why wasn't any vehicle info entered into the complaint? The car, so we thought, was registered in Bryan's name. However, that box is checked no. Odd, isn't it? Despite it not being a Pennsylvania crime, Morgan County District Attorney Mike Mancuso used the opportunity to bolster his bid for re-election in 2023. Same role as Ass Clown. He never did sign the Pennsylvania criminal complaint that tarried the arrest of Kohberger after law enforcement put on a show by breaking up the Kohberger house. The Mancuso's roles in the late execution of this criminal complaint leaves one wondering why the criminal complaint could not find its way, and if there's another criminal complaint filed somewhere out there, we'd like to know what it looks like. Why did the complaint have to go through the Mancusos at 6:30 in the morning, some 5 hours after police descended upon 119 Lambsden Drive? Pennsylvania makes its position clear on nepotism. It doesn't seem too ethical having a district attorney roll over to have the county judge review a criminal complaint. Which one of those two is the real judge, anyway? Who is verbal approval? This field requires a signature. The date is denoted as December the 30th, and the time of the offense was stated as 01 hour and 30 minutes. Two problems here. First, the criminal complaint, this one in particular, comes at 6:36 in the morning on the 30th of December of 2022. Was Kohberger arrested prior to the filing of a criminal complaint on account of an arrest warrant? This criminal complaint says here that the time of offense is 1:30 Remember this. Which offense occurred at that time?
A mere allegation is not sufficient to initiate criminal charges. Just as a police officer must do, you must demonstrate that probable cause exists that the person you wish to have arrested did in fact commit a crime. The two statements are read from the Monroe County District Attorney's website. The first criterion that needs to be met is that there should be evidence of a crime. Judging by the 1122 King Road crime scene, when it existed, had been met. Crimes took place at the crime scene. The second criterion, in my opinion, has not been demonstrated. There is no definitive proof that demonstrates that Bryan Kohberger's vehicle was present at the crime scene, nor has it been demonstrated that Bryan was the person or one of the people who are guilty of these murders. We believe that the cell data will also disappoint those hoping that the state will be able to deliver on their promises beyond a shadow of doubt. When we return, we will finish picking apart the legitimacy of Pennsylvania's arrest and subsequent searches of Bryan Kohberger. We will return shortly with the second half of our introduction to Pennsylvania, Kohberger's final destination. As we make our way through Pennsylvania's legislation governing the filing of a criminal complaint, we will compare what the PA Code suggests versus the ways that law enforcement carried out their impromptu plan to secure their intended target in dramatic fashion when the situation never required it. We will return shortly.